This evening we're going to be in the book of Hosea and going to begin there in chapter 3 and look at the first verse that kind of sets the stage for all of the drama that really has unfolded in the life of Hosea, this prophet of God, as he has been given a very unique and difficult task, and one that I sometimes have wondered just how others may have responded if given the similar command and situation that God had put him in. And so truly Hosea was a man of great faith and truly a man to be emulated, that when we often cannot see all of the specific details of how things can work out. But God has a plan, God has a vision. And as long as we trust that vision and we do the very best that we can in our part to obey the things God has told us to do, can trust that God is using us to work out His will and His plan and His purposes. All things do work out for good for those who love the Lord. And so I want to begin here in verse 1 of chapter 3, kind of set the stage for where Hosea is, and we'll kind of give us an introduction into what has been happening to him in his life and some of the drama that he's been involved in personally. Here in chapter 3, verse 1, it says, "Then the Lord said to me, 'Go again, love a woman who is loved by her husband, yet an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the sons of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes.'" Here, Hosea has been in a very interesting predicament. Back in the very first chapter, we find something very odd and very unusual. It's about the woman that he would be told to take as a wife. God specifically had a very unique woman picked out for Hosea, and may have been kind of a shocker to anybody who knew Hosea as a man of God, as one who faithfully was trying to serve God with all of his heart. And he was actually told to take a woman who was a prostitute. He said, "I want you to take her, have a wife, have children through her." And you can only imagine maybe what others may have been thinking. How long is this going to last? How long is this going to work out? Two very different individuals. Hosea, a man of God, and here a woman of a questionable background and questionable loyalty or fidelity of any kind to one man, as she is selling herself out to anybody who has the right price. And things do kind of unfold as you would probably expect. She leaves her husband. She goes back into prostitution. And she is in a mess. And that's where we find Hosea at this point. God is basically telling him, go find your wife. She's still your wife. Even though she is an adulteress, I want you to go and seek her out. If we back up a little bit to the first chapter, go to Hosea chapter 1. And find the stage unfolds for us. In Hosea, the first chapter, beginning in verse 1, says, "The word of the Lord, which came to Hosea, the son of Beeri, during the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and during the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. When the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, 'Go, take to yourself a wife of harlotry, and have children of harlotry, forsaking the Lord.' So he obeyed. He went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. And the Lord said to him, 'Name him Jezreel for yet a little while, and I will punish the house of Jehu for the bloodshed of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. On that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel.' Then she conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. And the Lord said to him, 'Name her Leruhamah, for I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel, that I would ever forgive them. But I will have compassion on the house of Judah, and deliver them by the Lord their God, and will not deliver them by bow, sword, battle, horses, or horsemen.' When she had weaned Lo-ruhamah, she conceived and gave birth to a son. And the Lord said, 'Name him Lo-ammi, for you are not my people, and I am not your God.'" What we find is that God has a very specific reason why He is choosing this prophet to marry a woman like this. It's really to send a message to Israel. And what he's basically saying is, this is basically the nature of our relationship. It's as if I have been joined to a nation that truly does not love me. Your eyes are constantly on everything else around you. You're on the world and all of its idolatry and all of its allurements. And it's broken me. It pains me. And even says eventually he's going to cause heartbreak to fall upon the nation of Israel. And Gomer really was representing this nation that is joined to God. And what's interesting is that even as disaster is on the horizon, and certainly disaster is on the horizon for this marriage, there's really very little hope. And God has a plan. And God is saying that even in the treachery, even in the unfaithfulness, even in the fact that she will eventually leave that house, she will abandon her children, she will abandon her husband, she will leave and go back to her previous way. She's not going to be faithful to him. He says, I know all this, and I'm going to put a hedge around her and almost make things so difficult for her that you almost have no choice but to see the goodness of the husband that loved her before and make it so that she would want to come back. And then we have this plan unfolding for us in chapter 2 about how God's plan is ultimately to win her back. And you might say to yourself, well, how do you win someone back who chooses not to stay? How do you win someone's heart who has no desire to be there to begin with? How does all this work out? And yet here is God's plan. Notice chapter 2. In chapter 2, notice verse 6. He says, therefore, behold, I will hedge up her way with thorns, and I will build a wall against her so that she cannot find her paths. She will pursue her lovers, but she will not overtake them. And she will seek them, but will not find them. And then she will say, I will go back to my first husband, for it was better for me then than now. As we go on, it's a very beautiful statement here, and I want to move a little bit further in the chapter. But notice in verse 18, Hosea chapter 2, verse 18, here's God's ultimate plan of what his hopes are for not only the nation, but for this marriage. In verse 18, it says, in that day I will also make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, the birds of the sky, and the creeping things of the ground. And I will abolish the bow, the sword, and war from the land, and will make them lie down in safety. I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in loving kindness and in compassion. And I will betroth you to me in faithfulness. Then you will know the Lord. It will come about in that day that I will respond, declares the Lord. I will respond to the heavens, and they will respond to the earth. And the earth will respond to the grain, to the new wine, and to the oil. And they will respond to Jezreel. And I will sow for her myself in the land. I will also have compassion on her who had not obtained compassion. And I will say to those who were not my people, you are my people. And they will say, you are my God. So again, great master plan. How do you have this end result with a woman? She's left. Here's God's plan. We get to chapter 3 and find out, well, good luck getting there because she's gone. She has abandoned, she's back to her ways, she's a prostitute again. And so here is what God then says to Hosea chapter 3, verse 1. It says, then the Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by her husband, yet an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the sons of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes. In other words, they're so attracted to all the things of this world. In other words, their eyes were always on things outside that love affair that God had for His special people. Even though He loved them, even though He had such high hopes for them, their eye was always constantly on the allurements and the temptations of other things. It was never on the one who loved them. It was never on God. So here's Gomer, or rather Hosea. Go get her back. Well, God gives him a hint as to where he might find her. She's back in the streets. She's become a prostitute again. Now imagine, you're her husband. Can you imagine what kind of journey that must have been like? Can you imagine the streets that Hosea must have to go down, the places that people say, people of God shouldn't be in places like that. And there's Hosea trying, Gomer, everybody seen Gomer? Oh yeah, well she was with a couple people the night before. Typically, you know, the places where people take prostitutes. He's looking for her. God says, you go back to your wife. And we find that he eventually catches up and he finds her. Hosea finds his wife, and it's worse than what he thought. Not only is she back to prostitution, she's now being sold to the highest bidder. And you can imagine the scene. Gomer shows up, sees his wife, and it's perhaps an auction situation, and people are having all kinds of individuals who would love to pay price for her. They don't love her. Here's the husband. And she doesn't love him really necessarily. She's willfully gone back to this life. And you can imagine Gomer or Hosea, that's my wife. She belongs to me. I don't care if that's your wife. We're selling her. But I'm the husband. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We're selling her for the highest bidder. And so you know what Gomer does? Or Hosea? Hosea pays the price. It says here, let's back up. Hosea chapter 3 verse 1. It says, "Then the Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by her husband, yet an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the sons of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes. So I bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver and a omer and a half of barley." How does that make kind of complicated sense? It's your wife. She already belongs to you. Why not use the rights that you have as husband? She's mine. And no, she's on the auction block. And those who have possession of her say, no, you want her. You're going to have to pay for her. Can you imagine a husband having to pay to get his own wife back who doesn't even love him, doesn't even want to be with him? What would you do? I know what I would think about doing. He pays. He pays for that which truly already belongs to him. And what's interesting, there's a passage of Scripture that talks about the fact that everything belongs to God. And when we finally realize this is actually a picture, it's a bigger picture of God's love for those that already belong to him. And he was always willing to pay a price to bring those that are already his but have chosen willfully to leave him, to bring them back. In Psalm 24 verse 1 it says, "The earth is the Lord's and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it." So in other words, when we're reading the story of Hosea, the Bible says Hosea is a picture of God, and you and I, no offense, are a picture of Gomer. That's what we're finding here. And so in other words, you know what we're finding here is interesting. Hosea probably doesn't even realize this, but Hosea's life and this scenario is setting up a preview of the gospel. Now let's think about that. We belong to God. We are his creation. And yet we have left him almost in idolatrous fashion, going after raisin cake, going after all the allurements of all the things unrelated to his divine love and his divine purposes for us. And here's Gomer going through this, or Hosea going through the streets, finally finding his bride in a very unique situation, being auctioned off, and he pays for that which already belongs to him. This, amazingly, is already the story of the gospel. Because what we find is that God came down as a man, and he went through those back alleys, he went through those streets, and he called all sinners and tax collectors and all kinds of people of ill repute. And he let them know how much he still loved them. And then, you know what, even though they already belonged to him, but sin had drifted away and separated them from their God, and then here God pays the price for what he already possesses. Amazing. And you know what's interesting? We're going to find something here. Notice what it says. Let's go back to Hosea chapter 3. It's a very interesting verse in Hosea chapter 3. Hosea chapter 3. Let's just read it in its context. Hosea chapter 3 verse 1. Then the Lord said to me, Go again, love a woman who is loved by her husband, yet an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the sons of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes. So I bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver and 1.5 omers of barley. Then I said to her, You shall stay with me for many days. You shall not play the harlot, nor shall you have a man. So I will also be toward you. For the sons of Israel will remain for many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, and without ephod or household idols. Now verse 5, he talks about the very, very distant future. He says many days from now, things are going to happen. Notice verse 5. Hosea says, Afterward, the sons of Israel will return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king. And they will come trembling to the Lord and to His goodness in the last days. I like the King James Version. Actually, I think renders this actually gets the point a little bit easier in this translation. It says, And they shall fear the Lord and His goodness in latter days. This is amazing. This is awesome. This is Hosea again, trusting the picture, trusting the scenario that's been placed before him. Marry this woman. The likelihood of her actually staying with you, very, very low. Very low percentage. She's actually going to stay with you. This is her background. This is what she is. She didn't choose to love you. You chose her. And there she goes, right out the door, right back to what she already. Of course. No big surprise there. And then this prophet being told by God, go back, search for her, find her. He finds her. She's being auctioned off, and he actually pays the money to get her back. And then as he brings her back home, he's telling her this picture, this word of God that's come to him and saying, well, here's this beautiful picture that's been given to me. I may not understand all the circumstances, just that I didn't understand all this, what's happening to me now. But in the later days, there's going to come a time when God's people will be yearning to come back in some way. And he says, what's going to happen? What's going to bring them back? Verse 5 says, Afterward the sons of Israel will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and they will come trembling to the Lord, and they shall fear the Lord and His goodness in the latter days. In other words, this word fear, it's a different kind of fear. Not the terrifying, trembling kind of, I'm fearful of my life kind of fear. They were very familiar with that kind of fear. That was the fear that dominated the understanding they had of God, was that you had this law, you had this expectation. If you don't obey the law, then you're condemned, you'll be killed, there'll be severe punishment. Did you catch what's interesting? He says there's going to be a different kind, not a terrifying fear. This is the fear of awe. It says in the later days, what will bring the people back is they will actually be in awe of the goodness of God. Just as Gomer has to be in awe of someone who goes to all this effort, all this trouble. After all, she's abandoned her family, she's abandoned her children. She never wanted to be there to begin with. And he goes through the effort. He's searching for her diligently, finds her. And then, of course, anybody else would just go and say, oh, she's up for bids. You better believe I'm not paying a cent for her. After all she did, after all she is now, you actually expect me to pay a dime? He pays the full amount that they're asking for. And what this is a picture of, that God trying to win His people back, win over their hearts, that they would be almost fearful, almost in awe of a God who loves them that much. That's what Hosea is prophesying. He said, there's going to come a day. This is our day. We live in a day where we get to tell the story of the gospel of Jesus Christ, who God sent His Son to this earth, to this sinful place, looking and searching in all those dark places of all the people who abandoned Him, that have lived their sinful life, and then paid the price to win them back. Wow. He says, you know what that's going to have effect? The fear of the Lord and His goodness will turn them back. That perhaps explains a little bit of what happened to that woman we looked at this morning. Her response was she was in awe of the goodness of the Lord. That is what won her over. This woman, who was a woman of the streets, she was a woman like Gomer's background. And it's so beautiful, the connection there is that this was prophesied that these things would happen. That those who were living in that way, and what's very, very beautiful, there's a very beautiful picture of God's plan to restore and bring back redemption. There in Hosea chapter 2. Read it with me, Hosea chapter 2. I'll back up there and read again God's plan for all this. And let's start in verse 1. Hosea chapter 2, verse 1 says, "Say to your brothers, Am I, and to your sisters, Ruhamah, contend with your mother, contend, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. And let her put away her harlotry from her face and her adultery from between her breasts, or I will strip her naked, expose her as on the day when she was born. I will also make her like a wilderness, make her like desert land, and slay her with thirst. Also I will have no compassion on her children, because they are children of harlotry. For their mother has played the harlot, she who conceived them has acted shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers, who gave me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up her way with thorns, and I will build a wall against her, so that she cannot find her paths. She will pursue her lovers, but she will not overtake them. And she will seek them, but will not find them. Then she will say, I will go back to my first husband, for it was better for me than now. For she does not know that it was I who gave her the grain, the new wine, and the oil, and lavished on her silver and gold, which they use for Baal. Therefore I will take back my grain at harvest time, and my new wine in its season. I will also take away my wool and my flax, given to cover her nakedness. And then I will uncover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and no one will rescue her out of my hand. I will also put an end to all her gaiety, her feasts, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her festal assemblies. I will destroy her vines and fig trees, of which she said, These are my wages, which my lovers have given me. And I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field will devour them. I will punish her for the days of the Baals, when she used to offer sacrifices to them, and adorn herself with her earrings and jewelry, and follow her lovers, so that she forget me, declares the Lord. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, bring her into the wilderness, and speak kindly to her. Then I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a door of hope. And she will sing there as in the days of her youth, as in the day when she came up from the land of Egypt. It will come about in that day, declares the Lord, that you will call me Ishi and will no longer call me Baali. For I will remove the names of the Baals from her mouth, so that they will be mentioned by their names no more. And in that day I will also make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, the birds of the sky, and the creeping things of the ground. And I will abolish the bow, the sword, and the war from the land. And I will make them lie down in safety. I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in loving kindness and in compassion. And I will betroth you to me in faithfulness. Then you will know the Lord. And the pictures, well, how? By exactly what Hosea does. He searches for her, he finds her, and he pays the ultimate price for her, dedicating, saying, I will never stop loving you. Isn't it interesting? The picture there is that he will bring this hedge, he will remove all the pleasures of their life. Well, when Jesus came, that's simply what happened. They were under Roman occupation. They were paying heavy taxation on the land that was given to them to enjoy freely. And they're having to pay for their own possessions, what God gave them to richly enjoy. And yet in the context of all that, where God brings this hedge, makes it so difficult, where they're just frustrated, in the presence, in the midst of that, He sends His goodness. He sends a door of hope. And it was Jesus who in the midst of this says, I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved. And how did He motivate them to walk through that door? He said, I come with my life. I come with the demanded purchase price that it's going to cost blood. And if that's what it's going to cost to bring you back to me, I will gladly pay it. And He lays down His life for ultimately those who already truly even belong to God, yet they've chosen to flee away from Him and run away from Him, choosing all the mundane, vain, momentary pleasures of life. Jesus comes in gentleness, alluring them, seeking after them, giving them an offer that they just simply cannot refuse. Won't you come back? Won't you realize how much better it will be with me? And it truly is a beautiful account, a beautiful story of redemption. It's truly amazing as we see this again, that this is the design of this prophetic picture of Hosea and Gomer. That Hosea is playing the picture of God, and Gomer is playing the picture of God's people. All of us at some point in time have all gone astray. We've all fallen short. We've all, like sheep, gone after our own ways. And what this is a beautiful picture of the gospel story that also we see a beautiful picture in Isaiah chapter 53 of how all this came to pass with the life of Jesus, how He came seeking and searching to save the lost, and how it all became an amazing story of love to win back the souls of the rebellious. As we see in Isaiah 53, beginning in verse 3, it says, He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And like one from whom men hide their face, He was despised, and we did not esteem Him. Surely our griefs He Himself bore, and our sorrows He carried. Yet we ourselves esteemed Him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But He was pierced through for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The chastening for our well-being fell upon Him, and by His scourging we are healed. All of us like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, but the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to fall on Him. In many ways it fell on Hosea. He paid the price for her choosing this life. Caused him to pay to get her to be his wife again. That's what Jesus did for us. He paid to bring us, but rightfully belonged to Him anyways. But because we chose to leave, we chose to go back to the world. And He never stopped giving up. He kept searching to let us understand that's the amazing love, that it would win us, that we would be in awe of the goodness of God. That goodness would weigh upon us and just wrestle our will to the ground and surrender to that kind of love. And realize we're not going to find offers like that. We're not going to find dedicated love like that anywhere else in this world. We're not going to find it. It just simply isn't there. And he goes on and says that's the price that was paid, and there was a demonstration of that seeking love to win us back over. So there, verse 7 of Isaiah 53 says, He was oppressed and He was afflicted, yet He did not open His mouth. Like a lamb that is led to slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before its shears, so He did not open His mouth. By oppression and judgment He was taken away. And as for His generation, who considered that He was cut off out of the land of the living for the transgression of my people, to whom the stroke was due. His grave was assigned with wicked men, yet He was with a rich man in His death, because He had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in His mouth. But the Lord was pleased to crush Him, putting Him to grief, if He would render Himself as a guilt offering. I truly am in awe of that kind of goodness. Who does that? No one but the Lord. And no one but Hosea was going to do that in his day, I'll tell you that. No one but Hosea was going to do something like that, because God had specifically told him to do this. And Jesus, in obedience and his desire to win us back to the Father, does this as well. It says, notice it says in verse 11, as a result of the anguish of his soul, he will see it and be satisfied. By his knowledge, the righteous one, my servant, will justify the many, as he will bear their iniquities. Therefore I will allot him a portion with the great, and he will divide the booty with the strong, because he poured out himself to death and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he himself bore the sin of many and interceded for the transgressors. When we have lived our life outside of the grace of God, it is like us being essentially Gomer, leaving the goodness and the abundant kindness of God and saying, thank you, but no thank you. I'm going over here. And literally selling ourselves out for vanity. Most people would say, husbands would say, you've chosen that? Bye. Why doesn't Hosea do this? Because this is a picture of God. God will not stop. He will not stop searching. And he demonstrated that in Jesus. As we looked in this morning, this woman herself, she was in awe of it. It's what won her over. It's what was the cause of her tears. It was the cause of her amazing gratitude. Who loves people like that? And that's what God said. That was his plan all along. She eventually, it's going to win her over. When she says there's nowhere else to go. And here, of all the people that could have bought her out, of all the places she could have ended up, it was her husband who comes and beats everybody out and pays the price before anybody else can get to her. That had to have wrestled her heart away. It finally gotten to her. Hence, that's what Hosea was saying. He says, there will come a day when they will learn a new fear. Not a terrifying fear. I'm in awe of a God who loves me like that. In 2 Corinthians, Paul writes about this in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, it says, this is the essence of how the gospel wins us over to him. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, notice there in verse 11, it says, therefore, knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade men. But we are made manifest to God, and I hope that we are made manifest also in your consciences. We are not again commending ourselves to you, but are giving you an occasion to be proud of us, so that you will have an answer for those who take pride in appearance and not in heart. For if we are beside ourselves, it is for God. If we are of sound mind, it is for you. For the love of Christ controls or constrains us. It wins us to him. Having concluded this, that one died for all, paid a price for us. Therefore all died to the vanity of life here. It's what truly caused Gomer to finally surrender her life of harlotry and say, I've had enough. I will come back to you. You came back and brought me back to you. And that was God's plan all along. And Hosea obediently following it every step of the way. And here's Jesus following the will of his Father every step of the way, all the way to the cross. Well, again, our picture this morning. If this sinful woman responded the way that she did in the text in Luke chapter 7, simply because he demonstrated how much care he had for her in his preaching and his teaching and his miracles and his treatment of people, how much more do we have to thank God when we have seen him die? We have learned of him dying for us. And how much more does that have the potential to win people over to the Lord by hearing that message? He died for all so that they who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and rose again on their behalf. It is the only thing that truly finally gets that stubborn, rebellious will to crumble and melt and surrender and change. So all along, even as God was doing very harshly at times with his own people, there were glimpses where he gave a future preview of how he's always working things out eventually to get to the gospel message of amazing goodness of God that would make it too good to turn away from it and to turn down his offer. So if you're with us this evening And perhaps you find yourself, even as you hear others who care for you, love you, plead with you to continue to serve God or begin serving God, perhaps you continue to find too much enjoyment or satisfaction in other things outside of a life with God. Know that just as Hosea would not give up going as far as it took, God is not done searching for you. And perhaps this can be a reminder to you that He's looking for you. As Jesus said, He came to seek and to save the lost. You don't become saved until first it dawns on you He has never stopped seeking you. Won't you realize tonight that He is seeking you this very hour, this very moment in your life? Even as you may be sitting there saying, I've heard it, yeah, I know what I'm going to do later. He's still seeking you. He is seeking you with His love. I want you to know how much I love you. And you will not find the satisfaction you're looking for in anything else outside of Christ. You will find it solely in Him. So won't you please surrender? Won't you realize that goodness and that love is unmatched, unparalleled anywhere else? And truly confess that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, repenting of your sins, be baptized in water for the forgiveness of your sins, and seek to be faithful to Him and serve Him. As He loves you dearly. He sent His Son to die for you. Has made water the available source for you to, in faith, die to this world, be buried in water, and rise to walk in newness of life. Won't you obey the gospel while we stand and sing this song of encouragement together?